read 20 books in May and 21 books in June, and here are my thoughts on all of them. Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. As you heard me say in the previous clip, today we're going to be talking about all the books that I read in both May and June. As I mentioned in a community post that I posted, my camera and memory card stopped working when I was in the middle of filming my May wrap-up last month, and I could not figure out what was wrong with it, so I decided to just lump both these reading wrap-ups together into one video and film on my phone, which is what you're seeing me on today. It looks a little different, but I feel like we can make this work. So without further ado, let's jump into all of the books that I read across both these past 2 months. We have 41 books to get through, so we're gonna have to speed run this a little bit so that this video isn't hours long. First, jumping into some quick stats. In May, I mentioned I read 20 books and 7,943 pages and listened to 133 hours. In June, I read 21 books, but my page count is a little bit lower. We're at 6,830 pages because I read a few novellas this month, and then I ended up listening to 131 hours. Okay, the first book that I read in May was an arc of this new adult fantasy standalone novella. It's called To Sway a Soul, and it's inspired by Chinese folktales and follows an artist's apprentice and an art thief. There's a little bit of forced proximity and one bed trope as well. If you're looking for a low stakes, cozy fantasy, but also has the aesthetic of a historical C-drama, I think you'll enjoy this. The physical book is also so beautiful. The interior of the book also features like 20 plus illustrations from the author herself. If you want a book just purely for how beautiful it is, I highly recommend this one. Next, I read King of Envy by Anna Huang. This is the 5th book in the Kings of Sin series. You probably know a lot about it, so I won't go into too much detail. I do believe that most of Anna Huang's books end up reading the same. They kind of have the same types of tropes like forced proximity, forbidden romance, jealousy. I think at the end of the day, like, her books are fun and I still do enjoy reading them, and I also enjoy the cameos of the other characters from Anna's books during Ayana and Jordan's bachelor/bachelorette party, Sebastian and Maya, and Maya is a South Asian woman, so very excited to see what Anna does there. Okay, and then the next arc that I picked up was The Night in the Muff by Rachel Gillig. I really enjoyed this. I did do this on audio, but I still had such a great time reading this. This book follows a woman named Sybil who's a diviner, and diviners are essentially these figures that receive visions from these things called omens, and they can kind of predict terrible things that are going to happen in the future. So people from across the kingdom will come and visit the diviners to kind of learn of their fates, and then one day one of Sybil's fellow diviner sisters ends up vanishing, and then more and more each diviner goes missing. And then this very mysterious knight comes to the cathedral that Sybil lives in, and she seeks his help in finding her sisters alongside this gargoyle companion. And the 3 of them, they go on this journey to find out what happened to her diviners, and this journey kind of forces them to question some of the divine and religious beliefs that have been bestowed upon everyone in this kingdom from an early age. The fantasy itself is super atmospheric. I really loved seeing this world through Sybil's eyes, and the gargoyle companion offers some really great comedic relief throughout the book, and the romance was so good. I feel like this book has that perfect blend of a fantasy with a romance subplot. I cannot wait for the second book, especially after that ending. I'm sure there's going to be so much angst given how we left things in book 1. I highly recommend this if you enjoy very atmospheric fantasies with romance subplots. Then I listened to an ALC of The Romance Rivalry by Susan Lee. This is Susan's newest YA romance between 2 rival romance reviewers, Irene and Aiden. Their banter was so much fun. I really loved all of their scenes together. So many people who have read this book have said this, but this book is truly a love letter to the romance genre and its readers. And I think Susan overall really knows what romance readers want and how to write eye-catching love interests, and it's so apparent in this book through the romance and Aiden's character. I think right now it is my favorite book of hers. Then I read A Forgery of Fate by Elizabeth Lim. This is a new romantic fantasy inspired by Beauty and the Beast with vibes like The Little Mermaid. Her mom has put their entire family in this really high gambling debt. These gangsters come to her home and start demanding this insane amount of money, and if Truyan's family can't pay it off, they'll take Truyan's sister as payment. One day, Truyan crosses paths with a cursed dragon lord. He offers his hand in marriage to Truyan, and in exchange, he'll help her family get out of this debt. I read and enjoyed almost all of Elizabeth Lim's works. This This book in particular is super whimsical and I really love the magic and aesthetic of this world. There's also a plot twist that I did not see coming at all about two characters. That's all I can say without spoiling it. If you like dragons and underwater worlds in your fantasies, definitely pick this one up. Then I listened to the audiobook of Fearless, which is the finale in the Powerless trilogy. I really don't know why I chose to read this book. I think I just really wanted to finish the series and be done with it. I know so many young readers on BookTok are obsessed with this book, but I think when you've been a YA fantasy reader for over a decade, so many of the tropes, plot points, character dynamics feel so familiar to you because they've already been written and been written so well by other YA fantasy writers. However, I do feel like the plot in Fearless in particular was so lazy. Some of the plot points and twists felt like they were being included for the sake of having something exciting happen and not because they were actually delivering any value to the plot or story. I think if you're a long-time fantasy reader, I would recommend skipping this series as a whole. The next arc that I picked up was The Summers Between Us. I also did this one on audio thanks to Libro FM. This is a dual timeline second chance romance that follows Leah, who comes back to her family's summer cottage and reunites with her estranged childhood best friend Wes. It deals a lot with immigrant family dynamics, especially among a brown and Muslim family. There's definitely a lot of drama and angst in this book, and I feel like a lot of the themes of the family relationships are definitely relatable to people who grew up in immigrant families. Some of the plot points are more heavy than others, so I would definitely look at content warnings before picking this book up. It's not just a lighthearted second chance romance. There is a lot of additional baggage that comes with Leah and her journey in this book. Then I read Playing Hard, which is a YA high school teen romance. It's published by Wattpad Books, so it does have the typical formula of a high school romance. I was really excited for this book because the cover is so cute, but I had a hard time getting into it, which I was really disappointed by. Love interest really pissed me off in particular. He just spent so much time saying over and over how he wasn't into the main character, he didn't have feelings for her, he didn't really care for her. And I was like, what is the point of a romance if your love interest is going to be saying that for like 3/4 of the book? And I don't even mean it in a way where he was trying to convince himself that he doesn't have feelings when it's very clear through his actions that he does. No, this guy clearly did not show any sort of interest in the female main character. There were even times where his friends would say stuff like, hey, like, if you're not seeing this girl, if she's not really your girl, do you mind if like I make a pass at her, if I ask her out, like whatever? And he straight up would be like, yeah, go ahead, I don't care, I think you guys would actually make a good couple, etc. And I was like, how are you building a romance if your love interest is acting like this? Like, why would I root for a guy who does that? I was just put off by his whole personality and did not really care for this couple. The next audiobook that I picked up was Gold Coast Dilemma, which is a trad romance by Nana Malone, and it was really refreshing to read. She typically writes more serious, like billionaire, sometimes mafia, spy books, but this is a contemporary romance and reminded me a lot of Crazy Rich Asians, but set in Ghana. It follows a Ghanaian American heiress who has to choose between tradition, family, duty, and love. The audiobook is also narrated by Sunila Nankani, and she does such a good job with the narration here. In particular, when she's narrating Ofusua, our main character, and Ofusua's mother. There's this funny recurring bit in this book where Ofusua's mom says all of these West African proverbs, and I don't know if they're actual proverbs or just fictional ones that were made up for the sake of the story, but each chapter starts out with this proverb, and some of them are so ridiculous and funny that it just makes the whole situation super hilarious, especially when you're thinking about all of the hijinks that this like huge Ghanaian family gets up to. And the romance, of course, is very searing and full of heat, just like all of Nana Malone's romances, so I definitely recommend picking this up if you're just looking for a fun, steamy rom-com with a Ghanaian Crazy Rich Asians vibe. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Can't Get Enough by Kennedy Ryan. This was actually my first time listening to the audiobook in the Skyland series. The previous two books I read either in ebook or print format, but oh my gosh, I love this book and the audiobook so much. This is probably my favorite in the Skyland series overall. Even just leading up to Can't Get Enough, I think I secretly knew that I would relate to Hendrik the most out of all three girls that we followed so far in the series. I've talked more about this book in detail on my Bookstagram, but I really love the way that Kennedy Ryan portrays all types of love, not only in this book but all throughout the series, whether it's self-love, platonic love, family love, and romantic love, of course. First of all, Yasmin Soledad and Hendrik's friendship is so special, and I feel like the series series has truly reminded me. And then the romantic love in Can't Get Enough in particular was so good. Maverick is our love interest here. He's this very rich billionaire tycoon who runs multiple types of media partnerships, and Hendrix is someone who also runs her own business. And throughout this book you can really see that Maverick truly values Hendrix, not just as a romantic partner, but as a leader and as a true partner, both in their personal and business lives. It made me so happy to see someone who is as supportive, as caring, as rich as him chase after Hendrix. And Hendrix is someone who refuses to let a man stop her from achieving her dreams, but there were so many moments where Maverick showed her that you can still achieve your dreams while we're together, and here's how. He really did not stop his pursuit for Hendrix, no matter how many times she warned him that her career and her life would come first. He straight up was like, yeah, I understand, and I'll make it work because I want you. And it was that simple. And some of the scenes where they have these types of conversations are so crazy. If you know, you know. Again, there's so much I could say about this book. I talk about it more in depth on my bookstagram, but just know I love this book so much. 5 stars across the board. I love Kennedy Ryan's writing. I'm so happy that I get to live in a world where her writing exists and I get to read her books, and I cannot wait to read her upcoming works. Okay, the next 2 ebooks that I read were Tips and Trysts and Masks and Mishaps by Rebecca Kincaid. These are the next 2 books after Streams and Schemes, which I mentioned in my top books of 2024 video. This romance trilogy is a standalone, interconnected series following a trio of camgirl best friends, and these 3 men who are childhood best friends and work in like politics, law, and finance in DC. They're super rich, super wealthy, they come from old money, but this series still very much has this eat the rich perspective. And the guys of this book are so down bad and obsessed for the girls, it is not even funny. I have never read a contemporary romance series where the guys were so whipped for the girls the way that they are in this series. And it's very refreshing to see how comfortable in their masculinity they are, especially when it comes to the girls' careers. They're huge supporters of their women being cam girls and are their biggest subscribers. And I also mentioned that they're childhood best friends, so there's some very wholesome like found family and bromance that happens in this series as well. It's very sweet, but don't get me wrong, the romance is so high heat. Overall, it's just a very refreshing, fun, hilarious rom-com series. Rebecca Kincaid, the author, is also Mexican and Filipina, and so are the majority of the FMCs in this book. I don't know, I could go on and on about how unique this series is, so just do yourself a favor and pick this up if you're looking for a fun indie rom-com series. The next audiobook I listened to was Sanskari Sweetheart. This is a YA lazy romance with the time loop trope, where the main character keeps waking up again and again on the same day. I typically don't enjoy time loop books that much because it feels really repetitive to me, which I understand is the point of a time loop romance, but it still gets to me. I don't know, I just find it boring sometimes. But this book, however, didn't do that too much for me. Our main character is the dance captain for this Bollywood dance team, and our love interest is her co-captain, and they've been dating for a few years at this point, Reina and Aditya. And then during nationals, their team bombs their performance and Aditya breaks up with Reina after the performance. So it's just a complete disaster of a day. And poor Reina ends up having to relive this day again and again and tries to figure out a way to escape this time loop that she's stuck in. And not only break out of the time loop, but find a way to win nationals, get Aditya back, find out what happened that caused him to break up with her. It's just a lot, and I applaud Reina for having to go through it every single day. Fun fact, I also performed Bollywood dance growing up in college, so I feel like that part of the book was kind of interesting to read about for me. It brought back a lot of memories. And the romance was really heartbreaking at times too, as you can kind of tell from the premise that I laid out, but I think the resolution definitely paid off. The next book I read was Ride With Me by Simone Sultani. This is a marriage of convenience romance and an F1 romance between an F1 driver and the owner of a global bakery. They wake up one morning after their friends join bachelor and bachelorette party and realize they've been accidentally married in Vegas. After the shock is worn off, they decide to stay married because they think this fake marriage will help them solve both of their individual problems. I really loved Simone's previous book, Cross the Line, so I was super excited for Ride With Me, and this book was so much fun. Stella is a great FMC to read about. She's super funny, super confident. She knows exactly what she wants, and it was really funny to see Thomas be wrapped around her finger. This man was so obsessed with her. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Wild and Wrangled, which is the last book in the Rebel Blue Ranch series. First of all, I will never not be obsessed with these covers. They are all so gorgeous. This is a second chance romance between our characters Cam and Dusty. Cam is the biological biological mother of Gus's daughter from Lost and Lassoed, and we saw snippets of her in Lost and Lassoed. In that book, she was getting married to this new man, but you could tell that something was off about their marriage. It didn't really seem like she was marrying him for love, and clearly things didn't work out because here we have her romance with Dusty. Dusty is her high school sweetheart, and after high school they went their separate ways, became super estranged, but he still holds this torch for her. It's a sweet cowboy romance, kind of on the shorter side, honestly. I think the audiobook was only like 8 or 9 hours long. I breezed through it in one day. I still think that Lost and Lassoed is my favorite out of this series, but I really liked seeing all the characters come together at the end of this book, and it makes me sad that the series is over. Next, I listened to the audiobook of Heartbreaker, which is a YA Desi, specifically Bengali romance between two British Bangladeshi teens. This is a book that's released in the UK, but I was super lucky and found it on Hoopla for some reason. It's a reimagining of John Tucker Must Die, which is the early 2000s rom-com. Our main character, Sachi, is hell-bent on getting revenge on Fahim. He's the school's bad boy, and he broke her best friend Mona's heart. But of course, things get complicated when she starts catching feelings for Fahim, who is A, clearly infatuated with Sachi, and B, clearly not the type of bad boy that all the rumors in their school are saying about him. This was a very fun rom-com. I always say this, but I really love seeing typical teen rom-coms being set out with a brown cast and brown characters, and like just seeing the two of them on this cover is really special for me. This cover is so cute, first of all. I also feel like Anika Hussein's portrayal of Bengali family dynamics and Bengali culture is the most similar to my family that I've read out of all of the Bengali books, so for that reason I just really love reading her books too. And the friendships were really refreshing to read in this rom-com. It's not the typical type of friendship arc that you would expect from a storyline that's like John Tucker Must Die, so that was really cool to see too. And of course the romance is very sweet. Fahim has really great moments where he expresses his feelings and love for Sachi, which was very special. I really love reading those. Then in preparation for Imaginarium Book Festival, which I went to in early June, I read Tusk Love by Thea Guanzan. This is my other 5-star read this month. This is Thea Guanzan's newest romantasy that's releasing with Critical Role. It follows the daughter of a nobleman named Guinevere who is traveling on this journey to get to her parents, and she's also carrying something important and mysterious. She's also said to be betrothed to this man that her parents have arranged for her. And right at the start of the journey, her caravan gets attacked by bandits, and a half-orc named Oscar intervenes to help her. Oscar has no interest in helping Guinevere any further than rescuing her, but eventually he feels pity for her and decides to accompany her for the rest of her journey. So it's kind of like a road trip fantasy traveler's romance, and I love this book so much. But in a way I'm not really surprised because I love Thea's stories so much. I feel like she writes exactly the type of romantasies that I'm looking for. She has the perfect amount of tension, of hilarious character moments, dialogue, tropes that I love. Most of her character dynamics are some sort of grumpy sunshine. Oscar and Gwen in particular are so cute together. I can honestly read 1,000 more novellas of them just living this domestic life. And even though I've never played D&D or have been super familiar with Critical Role, I feel like the world building was super easy to understand as well, so I highly recommend this for my cozy romantasy lovers. Then I went on vacation at the end of May, and I decided to listen to the audiobook of If You Stay while I was traveling. This is a black romance / drama, I feel like that's the best way to describe it, between two former childhood best friends. And this book does have the amnesia trope, which I'm not the biggest fan of, but it was okay in this book. There were some instances where I felt like the plot points and story beats were a little cheesy, but overall I feel like I enjoyed this book. Because I was traveling, I feel like it was something I was listening to in the background to kind of just pass the time, and at times I wasn't fully invested in the story and this couple. It reminded me a lot of the type of romances that J.L. Seegers and Kennedy Ryan write, except I feel like the writing was not as great as their books. Hopefully that can give you a little insight into whether you think you'll like this book. Then I listened to the audiobook of The Charmer, which is the last book in the Biotech Billionaire series by Ava Rani. Whereas the first two MMCs of the first two books, The Spare and the Heir, are very stoic and grumpy, Xander is very much the flirty golden retriever type, hence the name The Charmer. This book also gave Crazy Rich Asians vibes, especially because the majority of the book is set in Singapore. Penelope's family is from Singapore, and I feel like the female narrator for Penelope, Rebecca Yeoh, did such a good job portraying that high-class, high-society Singaporean accent. Like, I literally felt like I was hearing Gemma Chan as Astrid as I was listening to this audiobook. And then Vikas Adam did Xander's voice, and he does such an incredible work with all of his narration. I think he's done all of the embassies voices in this series, which has been so fun. But yeah, he always kills it, and this was such a nice wrap up to the Biotech Billionaire series. Very excited to see where Ava's books go next. And then we have the last book that I listened to in May, and it was This Could Be Forever by Ebony Liddell. This is a YA romance between a black teen and a Nepali teen, which was pretty cool. I feel like we don't get to see a lot of interracial romances in YA books that aren't between two characters of color. Our main character, Deja, is obsessed with attending UMD College Park for school, and she's spending this like summer program at the university. And then our male lead is this boy named Raja, who works at a tattoo shop on campus, or like nearby campus. The previous book that I read by Ebony, Love Radio, was one of my favorite YA romances, so I was super excited to get into this for that reason, but I feel like this didn't quite live up to those expectations I had after reading Love Radio. In particular, I feel like this book was a little too insta-lovey for my taste. If you're someone who kind of enjoys the type of magical love at first sight, especially among teen romances, then I suggest you read it for that reason. The majority of the storyline also talks about the cultural differences between Deja's family and Raja's family, and how difficult their parents would be accepting the other person and the other person's family as their child's partner. And I feel like I've become a little tired of that storyline in interracial romances. I feel like it's a more common thing that happens among older generations who are looking for love. And don't get me wrong, there are probably instances where this still happens among people who are my age and younger, but I feel like in general, in 2025, a lot of families have become much more open to interracial relationships and having their kids date someone who is outside of their own culture. I'm just saying this again from my experience and the environment that I grow up in and currently live in. I'm not speaking for everyone, so maybe that may not be the case for you, but yeah, I feel like this storyline was a little overdone for me personally. Okay, those were all the books that I read in May. I realized I was yapping for a really long time about each book, and we have 21 books to get through for June, so I'm really gonna have to keep it short for the next several books. Okay, let's get into it. For June, the first book that I read was The God and the Gwisen by Sophie Kim. This is the sequel to The God and the Gumiho, which I loved when I read it last year. We pick up about 30 years after the events of The God and the Gumiho with Seokka, our trickster god who has been reinstated as a god. He's desperately been searching for his long-lost love over the past 30 years. The red thread of fate that he's using to find her leads him onto this cruise ship that carries the dead to the afterlife. And there he meets a quiet and smart Gwisen, Kisa, who is his soulmate. Then, when Seokka's brother Kwannon is murdered, Kisa and Seokka must work together to find out who murdered the emperor and also figure out this new relationship that the two of them have. This book was super bittersweet as we were watching Seokka desperately try to search the reincarnation of Hani. The passages where he yearns for Hani and reflects on their life that they spent together was so sad. I felt like my heart was breaking in two, but I love seeing the character development that Seokka went through. It was super emotional comparing him from book 1 to book 2. And I also can't even count the number of times that I laughed at the comedy in this book. It is so funny. There's so many times where Seokka is inconspicuously trying to show off in front of Kisa. You have all these hilarious inner monologues that Seokka and Kisa are having about impressing the other person. Seokka, Kisa, Somi, and Hajun were so funny. I love all their antics. And speaking of Somi and Hajun, I really love their dynamic as the second lead couple that you typically see in K-dramas too. Overall, I think this book is a must-read for all fans of The God and the Gumiho, and I am very excited for what Sophie Kim has next. And anyone who's looking for a fun mystery combined with romance, I will truly miss these characters and this world so much, but I am very excited for what Sophie Kim has in store next. Okay, then I read 2 Asian trans romances. The first one was Not Just Best Friend, which is a romance novella between 2 best friends and roommates. It's a super quick read. I picked it up because it's the prequel for the next book, Make Room for Love. Make Room for Love is a full-length novel following the friend of the couple from Not Just Best Friends. I feel like for both books, the writing is very matter-of-fact and serious, and I feel like both books were kind of lacking this emotional build-up that I typically like to see in my romances. I did enjoy Make Room for Love a little bit better. This one follows Mira, a South Asian trans woman who is looking for a new place to live in New York City. She runs into Isabel randomly at this lesbian nightclub, and Isabel has a space open in her apartment after breaking up with her partner, so she offers it to Mira and Mira moves in. I feel like the part that I enjoyed more than the romance in Make Room for Love was the union subplot with Mira, and then Isabel had a really unique subplot of losing her sister and the grief that she tries to navigate, as well as the tumultuous relationship she has with her living siblings. It was really thoughtfully included and really heartbreaking to read at times, but yeah, I think those storylines drew me in more than the romance. Next, I listened to the audiobook of The Thrashers by Julie Soto. This is a YA thriller slash supernatural mystery about a group of high school friends. They're popular kids in high school. They call themselves the Thrashers because the main guy in their group, his name is Zach Thrasher. Our main character, Jody, is Zach's childhood best friend, but over the years, he's kind of drifted away from her and she feels like an outsider in this friend group. I will say it's not very uncommon to have a plot about a group of rich kids trying to cover up this crime, but I feel like the thriller and like mystery part of this book was pretty interesting. I think the one part of this book that I did not like was the romance subplot. One of the boys in this friend group has this romantic subplot with Jody. It was confusing for me whether this was actually supposed to be a true romance because A, this guy was such an asshole and I hated the way that he was acting towards all of the girls in this friend group. B, the ending is left kind of open and vague and doesn't really offer an HEA in terms of like a romance HEA. And then 3, I have read romances by Julie Soto and I feel like she's very clear and intentional when she writes a romance between two characters, and this didn't feel like it. So I'm curious what her intention was between Jody and this other character, but I think that was the reason why I didn't enjoy this book as much as I thought I would have. Then I listened to the audiobook of Problematic Summer Romance. This has been all over BookTok and Bookstagram, so I won't go into too much detail. This is an age gap romance, hence the title Problematic Summer Romance. I am typically someone who does not like age gap romances, but I feel like it was handled pretty thoughtfully in this book, and if there's any author I trust more to handle an age gap romance, it's Ali Hazelwood. This book is very self-aware and grounded when it comes to the age gap relationship. I loved Maya as an FMC. She was really refreshing to read compared to some of Ali's other FMCs. I truly have to give major props to Maya though, the number of times that she did not let Connor's rejection of her stop her from pursuing him. Like the minute I hear any second of a rejection from a man, I am immediately walking away and never looking back. My pride is too big to be chasing a man, so major props to Maya there. But in true Ali Hazelwood fashion, you can tell that Connor loves Maya so much. I feel like that last 25% of the book was so sweet to read. I loved all the scenes where they got together, and ultimately while I don't think this ranks super high in all of my books by Ali Hazelwood that I read and enjoyed, I still had a fun time. Then I beta read Fair Trade by Millie Perez. This is a Latinx romance and the second standalone in Millie Perez's new sports romance series. I beta read this for Millie because she was seeking readers who have PCOS because the FMC in this book also has PCOS. This book in particular is a one night stand to forever, hate to lovers, marriage of convenience romance between the owner and the general manager of a baseball team. I love this book so much. I loved Nick and Luisa's banter. It was so fiery. They're constantly at each other's throats, and I love all the tension and forced proximity that came with their marriage of convenience as well. And this cover is also just so hot. I have loved all of Millie's books, and it's been really great to see her writing improve so drastically as each book is being published, and this book is definitely her best work yet. I cannot wait for everyone to read this. Then I listened to the audiobook of Park Avenue by Renee Actier. This is a woman's fic slash lit fic about a young lawyer named Gia who's assigned to be the lawyer of this very high profile Korean American family that runs this huge $1 billion valued K-beauty brand. It's pitched as Crazy Rich Asians because of all of these rich Korean family members and the antics that they get to as people who are in high society in New York City, and then also pitched as Succession because of all of the family dynamics, especially the rich sibling dynamics that Gia has to deal with as she's their family lawyer. It was a really engaging story and not one that I would typically pick up, but I love all of Renee Actier's books and I really love her storytelling. It's very apparent in this book too. I think her writing is also drastically improved from The Wrath and the Dawn, so that was also really nice to see. And as always, I really love all of her socioeconomic and cultural commentary, and in this book it was especially prevalent. I think that was honestly my favorite part of the book. Then I read an arc of Caught Up by Novessa Allen. This is the next standalone romance after Lights Out, which I'm sure you guys are all familiar with as well. This is a biker slash mafia mob romance, also a second chance romance, and also a camgirl romance. And I feel like I made the mistake of picking this up after reading Rebecca Kincaid's books because those books handled the camgirl aspect I think a lot better than in Caught Up. I was also very thrown off by Caught Up because the whole point of Lights Out and the reason why everyone loves it so much is because it's this unique, hilarious, very self-aware, masked stalker romance, and Caught Up is like the complete opposite. It's your very typical mafia slash mob romance. It's very serious. The only funny parts of this book were the cameos that Josh and Allie from Lights Out had, and I was just so confused why this book was so different from Lights Out. So yeah, I think this one was just really disappointing for me. It just read like any other white mafia slash mob romance that I've read, and I think if you're looking for something that's as unique and fun and engaging as Lights Out, you're not going to find that with Caught Up, unfortunately. The next audiobook that I listened to was Along Came a More by Alexis Daria. This book in particular follows a hotel owner and a school teacher, and I feel like the hotel owner love interest really reminded me of Raphael from Jane the Virgin. This romance was so sweet. Our main character Ava is such a people pleaser and really does everything to help her family, but her family never does anything in return and doesn't really recognize the efforts that she puts in to help the people around her. So I feel like a lot of this book was Roman, our love interest, teaching Ava about all the ways that she should be cared for and how to support her and love her. It's also a Latinx rom-com. I really love the representation there. Yeah, I think overall it was just a really sweet, heartwarming romance. I'm very excited to see what Alexis Daria writes next, but all of her romances have been such hits for me so far. Then I picked up Always Be My Bibi by Priyanka Taslim. This is a YA Bangladeshi romance set in Bangladesh, actually. It's about a girl, Bibi, and the younger brother of her future brother-in-law. So essentially Bibi and this guy, Sohail, their older siblings are getting married, and both of them think that their siblings are not good for each other. So they kind of team up to stop their older siblings' wedding from happening and show the other person why they may not be the best match for them. And it's set on this very beautiful tea estate in Bangladesh, so that was really cool setting to see. The romance is kind of like Mutual Dislike to Lovers. It features a very broody British Bangladeshi MMC, and Bibi herself is like Cher from Clueless, so that dynamic was really fun to see. And as always, reading Bengali books warms my heart so much. I really love Priyanka's first book, and this book was also just as fun. The next audiobook I picked up was 10 Incarnations of Rebellion by Vaishnavi Patel. This was one of my most anticipated books of 2025, and it did not disappoint. This is such a good historical fiction novel. It depicts this version of India if India did not gain independence from Great Britain and if Great Britain continued to rule over and colonize India. And it tells the story of Kalki, our main character, who is leading the Indian liberation movement along with her friends through the 10 avatars of Vishnu in Hinduism. So a very cool concept, and it was executed so well. Felt so moved and emotional reading about Kalki, Fazia, and the ILM's efforts to fight for India's independence under British rule. I was so engaged with the story from start to finish, and I think the audiobook too was so exceptional. The narrator did such a good job of bringing this full cast of characters to life through all of the accent work especially. And I feel like one of the main themes of this book is showing about the importance of resistance through any means or form. This book highlighted all the individual contributions to resistance, no matter how big or small, and how that culmination of all of those actions ultimately led to this big impact, like whether it's a boycott, an actual strike, casual conversations that you're having through word of mouth, secret meetings that you're holding to talk about India's independence. Like, all of those little actions mean so much in the grand scheme of things, and I really love how that was depicted. There's also really great discussions about violent versus non-violent resistance in this book, and because this book takes place over the course of many years, seeing the impact of the rebellion for generations and generations to come was also super special, especially through how Kalki's relationship with her parents is depicted. And I think ultimately this book does a really good job of showing who the true enemy was during British colonization, the British, and how Great Britain really divided South Asians among Pakistanis, Indians, and Bangladeshis, and of course Hindus and Muslims. Even if this book is ultimately a historical fiction novel, so many of the themes and discussions are still so relevant to current events that are happening today, and I just truly think that everyone should read this book, especially if they are someone who advocates for liberation from oppression for all groups that are under oppressive rule in this world today. Another audiobook that I picked up last month was Steal My Breath Away by Sarah Castile. This is a bodyguard romance between a senator's daughter, who is this up-and-coming singer, and her childhood best friend, who is assigned to become her bodyguard after an attempted kidnapping. movie. I really like the audio for the dual narration. I think bodyguard romances in particular are so underrated because I really love the protective nature that comes with the MMCs and the mix of the suspense and the romance. There's also a really good depiction of PTSD and grief that comes from losing a sibling in a very tragic manner. I feel like the only reason I didn't enjoy it as much is because this book features an MMC who used to be in the Air Force, and I feel like a lot of bodyguard romances have male leads that are ex-military, and I never understand why. I mean, I get why. It's because the author wants to show that they are really good at self-defense and self-combat and fighting and all this stuff, but I feel like there are ways to show that without having the male lead be ex-military. Maybe it's just me. Another audiobook that I listened to this month was Love Craves Cardamom by Ashna Abacha. This is a YA Desi romance set in Jaipur, India, about a girl who aspires to be an art curator for an art museum and a boy she meets when she spends a semester abroad working in India. Except this boy might be hiding a pretty big secret about his family and royal connections to the royal family of Rajasthan. So it has a little bit of hidden identities, but overall it's a pretty short romance. As you can see, the audiobook was pretty short as well, but I feel like it offers really great commentary about social justice issues that are happening in India, especially when it comes to the queer community in India. So I really love those themes. Then I read The Wrong Bride by Katharina Mora. This is the first book in the Windsor series. I believe that's what it's called. This is my second Katharina Mora book. I remember when I read the first book written by her, I was so shocked at the amount of drama that was in the book. It felt like I was reading something out of a soap opera, and it's exactly the same here in The Wrong Bride. It follows our main character Raven, who is arranged to get married to her longtime crush Aries, but Aries was originally supposed to marry her older sister Hannah, and so just seeing that drama play out was so crazy. I feel like there were a lot of parts that were repetitive, especially as Raven continues to get her heart broken by the thoughts of Aries still having feelings for her sister while being in this arranged marriage with him. And I feel like that was the reason I didn't enjoy this book as much, but I'm very excited for all of the drama with the rest of the Windsor siblings in this series, so I'll definitely have to check out the remainder of the books. The next audiobook I listened to was The Baby Dragon Cafe, which was available on Spotify Premium, even though this book was originally published in the UK. So if you're a Spotify Premium member and you're looking for a cozy romantic book about dragons written by a Desi author, definitely check out The Baby Dragon Cafe on Spotify. And this book was exactly as I just described it, a very cozy, low stakes fantasy where dragons are like one of the main creatures that people have, almost like how people have dogs. And there are other mentions of magical creatures too, so if you're looking for magical animal companions in this book, definitely check this out. The romance is pretty cute as well. Our main character is a owner of a coffee shop, and our love interest is the son of this really rich dragon riding family. I believe there are 2 more books in this series that are also set in this world, so definitely excited to check those out. And this edition that I have is also so cute. I love the sprayed edges, and then we also have this adorable end paper art as well as this foil stamp on the naked hardcover. My friend Kaylee got me this edition for my birthday. Another audiobook that I listened to this month was I'm Not Jessica Chen by Anne Liang. Anne Liang continues to devastate me with her YA romances, and I know this one was more like a speculative novel, but it still delivered that heartbreaking Anne Liang romance. It's about our main character who switches bodies with her perfect cousin Jessica Chen, who she accidentally wishes she could be after hearing that her cousin got into Harvard when she didn't. And the next day, lo and behold, she wakes up as her cousin and tries to figure out a way to get back into her own body. This was so good. I'm very excited to read some of the other YA releases that Anne Liang has put out since this book's release. Definitely recommend it if you have been a fan of any of her previous YA works. Okay, we have 5 more books to get through. Another audiobook that we have is Writing Mr. Right by Lena Kawaja. This is a book about a woman who's aspiring to be a writer and one day wishes that she could get more motivation to get through her draft and her manuscript. And then the next morning she wakes up and the living embodiment of her writing muse comes to life in the form of a man named Ashik. So it was an interesting concept. I feel like there were a lot of loopholes and questions in this book that I had regarding the logistics of a man coming to life from her brain, but overall the romance is pretty sweet. I feel like there were too many mentions of Taylor Swift for my liking, but other than that, I had a nice time. I don't think I enjoyed it as much as the author's previous book, Maya's Laws of Love, but it was still very sweet, and it does feature a Pakistani romance, so if you're someone who is seeking that representation in your books, definitely pick this up. The next book that I read was also a 5-star read for me, and it was Embrace the Serpent by Sunya Mara. I knew I was gonna love this book just because of the cover when it was first first released because look at that lilac and look at how gorgeous the jewels are on this cover. I also heard that it was a marriage of convenience with, of course, a DC themed fantasy, so I knew I was gonna love it for that reason as well. This book follows our main character Saphira, who is an apprentice in jewel smithing, but she's actually really good at it. And one day this king from a neighboring kingdom called the Serpent King comes to her kingdom looking for a wife, and eventually Saphira is roped into being his bride against her will. She becomes very entangled in all of the political affairs that are happening among the Serpent King's kingdom and her kingdom, and long story short, there is more to the Serpent King than what she was originally told. I mentioned this was a marriage of convenience, and while it's not the main focus of the book, I think the romance still really delivers in this. There's a lot of great banter and a lot of like quick, witty exchanges that I love. I feel like I can't talk much about the romance without spoiling anything, so just trust me when I say that it really delivered. And I think my other favorite aspect of the book is another little companion that we have. His name is Grimney, and he's this little stone golem creature that protects Saphira. There's a little drawing of him at the beginning of the book that shows how little and cute he is. I don't know if this will focus, but look at him, he's so adorable. I loved all the scenes that he was featured in and offered some great comedic relief. And then this month I also decided to read a novella, and it was a novella by Adriana Herrera called Heat and Run. I knew this book was a sapphic fantasy slash romance, but I didn't know that it was going to be Omegaverse, so this book incidentally ended up becoming my first Omegaverse book, which was crazy. I mentioned it was sapphic. It's also FFF, so it's a throuple, I guess is the best way to describe it, between an alpha, beta, and omega. It's also the fourth book in her Toy Runners series, which is a series of 4 novellas that describe people who are toy runners, essentially people who deliver toys for Christmas like Santa does. Super interesting premise. Obviously this book is very high heat. If you haven't read any of Adriana Herrera's books, she really delivers with the steaminess of her romances, and this book was no different. The Omegaverse aspect also went so crazy. I didn't realize how technical Omegaverses typically are, so I need to brush up on some of the vocabulary that's being used and what some of the words and processes mean, but overall this was a very fun read. The last audiobook that I listened to in June was The Dawn of the Cursed Queen by Amber Nicole. This is the 3rd book in the Gods and Monsters series. The first book is the Book of Asriel. I loved the Book of Asriel, and the second book, The Throne of Broken Gods, so I was super excited to read this, but I really put it off for a long time after hearing that the series was going to be like 7 books long, because that just seems so daunting. 7 books is crazy for a fantasy series, I'm sorry. But I found the audiobook on Libro FM and decided to listen to it. Even though this book is so long, the audiobook is as well. I really felt like I was able to get through it because of all of the crazy things that were happening in this book. It does have multi-POV storytelling that you typically see in really big epic fantasies, and while I wish the audiobook featured a full cast of characters rather than having like one narrator for the entire series, I still had a lot of fun. Sam Keel and Diana continue to be such a powerful couple, and I loved seeing them in this book, especially seeing them from the beginning of the Book of Asriel to how they are now. Of course, there are a lot of crazy plot twists and angsty moments and heartbreaking and heart-wrenching moments that happen along the way. I'm very curious to see where the series go next and how Amber is going to come up with enough plot to last 7 books. That is still so crazy to me. Also, I got this signed at Imaginarium when I saw her, so that was very exciting. And then we finally made it to the last book that I read in June, Meet Me on Love Street by Farah Heron. This was a cute YA DC romance set in Toronto between 2 teens who are trying to find a way to save their local community and the small businesses that have made up their local community and neighborhood. It's kind of like mutual dislike to reluctant allies to lovers. The romance is very sweet, and I really love the discussions about gentrification and supporting small businesses and giving back to your local community and the people that have shaped you to who you are as a young adolescent. I feel like so far I've enjoyed all of Farah's YA works over her adult one, so I'll definitely have to check out the other 2 that she's written. Yeah, it was super cute, a nice way to end June. Thank you guys so much for sticking with me through 41 books. I can't believe I talked for that long. I feel like my voice is about to give out. Please let me know if you read any of the books that I mentioned, what your favorite reads were for May and June, and I will see you in the next video. Bye!